because Tyson Fury's been flapping his gums, so we're going to pick up some of the things that he said, but he was also talking about the nature of a fight against Anthony Joshua.
Maybe that time has passed and it could have been a super fight. It could have been one of the greatest fights of all time.
The embarrassment for Anthony Joshua and being battered from pillar to post over 5 rounds, we hear the usual spiel from Chris.
He's talked the talk and we're still here waiting to watch him walk the walk. You just want to see some serious carnage there.
This fight that's getting everyone excited, Beterbiev and Bivol.
This is the kind of fight you want. This is the kind of fight that gets you licking your chops.
It is absolutely a beautiful, beautiful fight.
Welcome to episode 90 of Talk Boxing with Simon Jordan and Adam Catterall. Today we're joined from across the pond by the former WBA World Welterweight Champion, Paulie Malignaggi. Paulie, nice to see you.
How you doing, guys?
Yeah,
Good to see you.
We're going to jump in, fellas, to the heavyweight division. But before we do that, Paulie, because Tyson Fury's been flapping his gums, so we're going to pick up some of the things that he said. But I wanted to pick your brains on what you thought about the AJ situation, both in the fight and ultimately the things that are coming out of it post the fight.
What do I thought about the AJ situation and with the interview? I mean, I thought it was interesting. You know, I think it's always a fight that people are going to be interested in. I think it's a fight that people would want to always talk about regardless.
No, Paulie, I don't want to talk about the interview. I want to talk about the fight against Dubois.
Oh, the fight against Dubois. Well, the AJ fight against Dubois, I personally had picked him to win. I think, you know, he was favored by a lot of people. I had liked the way he'd been looking with Ben Davidson going into the fight. Obviously, he'd been at a level that was much lower than Daniel Dubois. He'd been fighting, you know, his last 2 opponents, Otto Wallin and then Francis Ngannou, were lower level opponents. But I'd like the way AJ had set up his punches. I liked the way AJ was calmer, and I'd like the way AJ had just showed a cerebral athletic side to him. But the Dubois fight showed me that sometimes, and I felt this at the end of my career as well, you just can't summon that energy to match the younger, hungrier fighter anymore, you know? And you get to the point where you may have some of the skill set, you may have some of the crafty ability in there, but that youth energy just kind of consumes you. And he looked a bit out of it there. You know, it looked like Dubois wanted it more. It looked like Dubois had more fight in him. Even in the clinches, if you notice, Dubois was trying to be the more physical guy, trying to, you know, force the fight. And AJ was really just looked out of his element, just looked like he never could get in there and get comfortable. The one thing that stands out, though, I was thinking early in the fight, I said, if AJ can weather this, like a true veteran, can he take the younger fighter late to where he can, you know, he can maybe do some damage? Sometimes we see these veterans do that to these younger fighters. And when the fight ended, I thought I was getting my answer, because he landed that big shot. Dubois went back to that corner and sort of retreated like he had felt the shot or he was a little bit hurt. And when AJ went for that extra offensive move, he got hit with the big right hand and got knocked out. So I didn't get my answer, but I thought I was about to get my answer.
But when you look back on the fights, Paulie, and you listen to, say, for example, the advice given by the corner, which a lot of noise has been made about that, and the sentiment of roll the dice and the strategy that was going to be deployed that I think Shane McGuigan was very vociferous on criticising. When you listen to the advice that was given to Anthony Joshua at the end of the 4th, coming out for the beginning of the 5th, which ultimately resulted in him getting knocked out, what was your takeaway when you got to hear that on playback?
You know, that's the thing. To make a solid trainer, there's a lot of things involved. First of all, there has to be a chemistry with the fighter, right? There has to be I think a stylistic chemistry, personally. When I was younger, I used to, you know, listen to the media and say, oh, a great trainer can adapt to any fighter. But, you know, I'm an idiot for listening to the media and thinking that was ever, thinking they would ever know something like that detailed about, you know, the actual combat part of boxing. As I've gotten older, I've realized that if you go to a trainer, you've got to go to a trainer that is not only good, but also is good at the same style or a similar style to the style you fight, so that you can, you know, you can kind of mesh together and blend together well, sort of like a marriage. When I look at what happened with Davidson, I feel like Davidson is probably a good trainer in the gym. I feel like he's, you know, he's one of those trainers that where technically he really gets it, but there's also a different element to that, and that's the trainer in the corner, you know, and the trainer in the corner also is, you know, he's technical in the gym, but in the corner, you have 1 minute, you have a pressure situation, you have the pressure moment, you got to give those key instructions and understand how to sort of guide the ship through that storm if it's necessary, or even how to navigate it in calm waters and keep it calm if you're winning the fight. And I think, there's an emotional side of it. There's a nervous element side of it. And I think maybe Davidson was sort of lacking in that department. I don't get me wrong. I've had trainers that, I won't give you names. I had trainers that were good in the gym, were horrible in the corner. I mean, we're horrible. We're great in the gym. We're great in the corner and we're horrible in the gym. So it could go either way. You need that good blend of both, and I think Davidson, it's the first time we saw him in that pressure situation with AJ, since getting with AJ. And yeah, I was a little bit disappointed in the way he navigated that.
Paulie, you've just been speaking a moment or two ago about desire when referring to AJ, and obviously the younger guy on the night coming through and getting the job done in Daniel Dubois. You've been there, done it and got the T-shirt. You've been at the highest of highs and obviously come down the back end of the career. What's it like when that fire and that desire is starting to maybe diminish, and battling with that, knowing full well that the time might be coming to an end? When do you concede in your own mind that it is the right time to be walking away?
Well, I tell you, it sort of starts to happen without you realizing it. And one of the main things I started to realize was that, there comes a point in your life when you're younger and you're thinking only about boxing, right? You're so focused, no matter what you're doing, no matter if you're with friends, if you're with family, if you're with your girl, if you're whatever, in the back of your mind, subtly, you're still thinking about what happened in the gym. You're still thinking about, what you want to do tomorrow, what you want to work on. It's always there subliminally. You're just consumed with it. You're consumed with the goal. And then as you get older, things happen, more different kind of responsibilities come into your life. Financially, you're moving in different directions as well. You may have different assets, you may have different things to attend to. You have, maybe some guys have a family or a wife and kids, whatever it is, there's different things that come into your life. But what all of a sudden starts to happen is you start to have to compartmentalize that full throttle on boxing. And it starts to get compartmentalized, and more it gets compartmentalized. And then what happens, at least in my personal situation, and I've heard it from a lot of other ex-fighters, you start to get the more little knick-knack injuries in the gym, the things that you didn't have before. You're getting a little older. Your body doesn't cooperate as much with you anymore, and you have these little stupid injuries here and there that sort of slow down the process. And the thing that I noticed now that I can say looking back, you leave the gym and you don't really think about as much about boxing when you leave the gym. You do your daily training and you leave the gym and your head is in other places, and then your head is not really back in the gym until you get back into training the next day, or maybe later in the day when you've got to do a second workout or something. But really, you no longer have that full mentality where you go on boxing. But when you're younger, you do. When you're younger, it's the most important thing to you, And in that obsession, you sort of start to lose it little by little. And I think that just happens with the getting older process. Physically we slow down, but mentally also we have so much else going on in our life that it's hard to match what a youth brings mentally to a fight, as opposed to also physically, of course. And I just think that it was different places. I can remember, looking at the AJ versus Vladimir Klitschko fight, a fight that I was there at and I worked. And I remember thinking that in the opposite direction. I remember thinking that, AJ had that and Klitschko, was trying to summon it. And he really did a good job that night of trying to summon it, even as an older guy, but he just couldn't match that energy there. He kept, if you remember, Klitschko kept talking about this obsession. He was obsessed. And I think he was trying to brainwash himself and getting himself there. And he's always been an excellent fighter. And I think, that made the fight what it was. But ultimately, AJ had just too much youth energy. It was that fire that you have at that age that consumes you, and AJ showed it that night. But here we are, 7 years later, I believe it's been 7 years since the Klitschko fight, and you see AJ was on the other side of it. Obviously it wasn't as good of a fight as AJ versus Klitschko as AJ. I felt right in the moment when he was maybe starting to turn things around a little bit, got himself knocked out, but it was I was basically saying the same thing, like I said, the subtle things I saw in the clinches, it was even when AJ was trying to land the shot, Dubois just kept coming forward. He couldn't, AJ just got put into flight mode. We call that in flight mode. And we're in the gym where I used to train where you're constantly going backwards so much that you can't get set on any good shots anymore, and you can't get the respect of your opponent.
So where does that leave you, Paulie, with the conclusion? I mean, we'll talk about Tyson Fury in a minute, some of the things he's been said, Adam, and I will talk to you about it. But where does it leave you with the rematch ideal in terms of you're now suggesting...
For AJ Dubois?
Yeah, Father Time has caught up with Anthony Joshua, albeit we're going to talk about Beterbiev being 39 years of age and still a monster, and it's a state of mind mentality. But where are you with, AJ going back in against Dubois, which looks to be the case, and what do you expect to be the outcome of that particular fight if it comes around?
I'll tell you what, if you're going to do a rematch, I'd want to see AJ in between, with something in between. I wouldn't want to see that direct rematch, and I know you're going to say the naysayer. Because I don't think you just go into a fight like that where you've got physically manhandled and then got knocked out bad like that. I think you need to go get something as a confidence builder, sort of to see where you're at, sort of to see where, if mentally you want to get in it. Because I tell you what, again, as part of going back to the being older conversation, they call you for the fight. When you're not under stress, your stomach is full, you're nice, you're living room watching TV or whatever, you're comfortable. They call you for that fight. You think, I can do this again. Yeah, I can get myself motivated. Yeah, I want to do this. Then you're in camp every day. Then or you find yourself on fight night in a tough situation, and you're like, dude, did I really want to do this again? Did I really need to do this again? And now you got to get yourself through a problem. When you're younger, you relish that. When you're younger, you're like, I can't wait for a tough training camp. When it's a tough moment in the fight, you relish it. You're like, all right, I can get through this. I got that fire, that inner desire to get through it. When you're older, you just don't have it the same way. And you could see AJ, when Dubois was bringing that fire, just couldn't match him. He couldn't match him. And that's something that you have to have that personal conversation within yourself. You can't lie to yourself. And it's tough not to do, don't get me wrong. But you got to say, can I really match that intensity if I find myself in that situation again? Do I really have it within me? Well, not just right now when I'm comfortable, but I can say yes.
Well,
Go ahead.
Don't you think, Paulie, that the embarrassment for Anthony Joshua of walking out in front of 96,000 fans and being deposited on his arse in the first round and being battered from pillar to post over 5 rounds will be part of the motivation that reignites some of the desire or some of the motivation that might have been missing? Are you just simply saying Father Time has caught up with him? If he's going to fight young bucks, he's going to have trouble?
Yeah. I mean, if what you're saying is true, then Muhammad Ali could have, got back on there and beat Larry Holmes and then, stayed around and fought him again and beat him. You're not going to be able to do that at a certain point. When that's gone, it's beaten out of you, and it's also, part of your mentality has changed. You're in a more of a preservation mode. You have other things to live for. You'll never not love boxing, but you're just not going to be with that same reckless abandon that a youth approaches it. The energy of youth is just different. And again, older guys, we've seen them sometimes. They're crafty enough where they can get around and beat the younger guy. But you're always going to have to go through that energy of the youth. And do you really want to go through that energy of the youth? It's that energy that AJ used to have. It's that energy that Dubois now has. And AJ, can he really match that intensity? It's more than just desire. It's just a mentality that sort of passes you by as you get a little older.
Well, I think it comes down to what you were saying before about having that full belly. There's that old saying, isn't there, about it's hard to get up in the morning when you're getting out of a bed full of silk sheets and all that type of carry-on. From an AJ point of view, he's done incredibly well in this career, hasn't he? He's done tremendously.
But his big motivation, Adam, and his big driving force was not economics, because that makes people soft. If you've got plenty of money in the bank, it makes you soft to some extent.
Yeah.
Was the 3 times heavyweight champion of the world. But let's park Anthony Joshua for the time being, or let's revisit him in a different...
Just on the fight itself, from what Paulie was saying there, I think Anthony showed an incredible amount of desire within the fight to keep getting up and going forward and walking into the fire. Yeah. I personally think he just got beat skill-wise. I think he got beat by a better guy on the evening.
On the night, yeah.
And listen, it could go...
But it's interesting because this epiphany that everyone has now got was something that no one saw before the fight. This questioning of a young man coming into a fight against an older charge that was perhaps at a certain stage in his career.
That's because Dubois hadn't won at that level before.
Absolutely. Well, look,
he has done now.
We'll move on from the AJ Dubois fight, but we'll talk about what Tyson Fury's been saying, because he's popped up, flapping his gums on TNT, talking about the idea. 2 things he was talking about. He was talking about his performance against Usyk and the next fight coming up. We'll get to that in a second. But he was also talking about the nature of a fight against Anthony Joshua and the potential of that fight being made, even if both fighters were to lose, if he was to lose to Usyk, and if there is a rematch and the rematch is signed to fight Dubois, and Joshua was to lose that fight would still be in demand. What's your take on that?
I think in some elements he's right. I think there's a pocket of the audience that would still buy a ticket and come out and buy a pay-per-view to watch Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury, regardless of their age and where they're currently at in their careers. Personally, for me, I think maybe that time has passed. I think we had better opportunities in the last 2 to 3 years to make that fight, and it could have been a super fight. It could have been one of the greatest fights of all time, and we might have got 2 and maybe 3.
Would you want to see it?
I'm a boxing fan, so probably, yeah. And I agree with what Tyson was saying on the TV at the weekend. It would be a travesty. I mean, if you think about this era and you think about the guys that have come through this era, the whole conversation of this era has been about Tyson Fury and has been about Anthony Joshua. For those 2 guys to have never have met each other in a ring, even if it comes when it feels a bit like Mayweather-Pacquiao or Khan-Brook, then I think it would satisfy a certain amount of thirst with some of the boxing audience. But it's, for me now, it's never going to be what it could have been.
Could have been, yeah. Which I think is a discredit on the promoters, quite frankly, because that fight should have been able to be made. But going to something else that Tyson talked about, which is the fight that's coming up now with Usyk, and his approach to this fight against his approach to the first fight, and his, in my mind, the rewriting of history. I don't know if Paulie's heard or seen it, but if he has, jump in, Paulie. But I wanted to know what your takeaway from what Tyson Fury was saying about specifically the way he's going to deal with Usyk this time round. He's in destroy mode, whereas last time he wasn't. I mean, this is a guy that was telling everyone that he was fighting a middleweight, and that that he was too big, too strong. So I'm curious to see, because my first reaction when I looked at it was, despite the fact that I think Tyson Fury is going to win this fight, and we'll get Paulie's opinion on that in a second, I thought it was a load of old bollocks. I thought it was nonsense what he said. I don't know what your thoughts were.
Well, fighters do this. Fighters have to get themselves into a frame of mind in order to convince themselves that last time this was the situation.
Sure.
This time it's going to be completely different.
And that's fine, but I'm asking you what we think of what he says.
I'm a man that sat across from Tyson Fury in the build-up to his Deontay Wilder second fight.
Yep.
And he kept telling me, I'm going to go forward and I'm going to knock this dude out. And I was like, mate, come on, give me the legitimate way that you're going to go about doing this. Because at the time, if everybody remembers, the best bit of advice that most people would have thrown towards Tyson Fury, stay out of range, stay on the end of it. You won the first fight, you just got done on the cards. Do exactly that again and you'll win and you become the champion of the world. What did he do? He turned up on fight night.
He met him.
And he absolutely battered him, is what he did. Nobody had ever done that to Deontay Wilder. So I think there is an element of what you're saying there regarding Tyson Fury trying to convince himself that this was the situation last time, it's going to be completely different next time, and I'm cool with that. It's his world, he's got to get himself in the right frame of mind. But there's also an element of me of saying, I'm not going to doubt him again, because he's done that to me before. I'd never thought that it was possible that he would be able to do what he did to Deontay Wilder in the way that he did it. And I genuinely believe that if he is to beat Alexander Usyk, the way that he's talking is the way that he's got to go and do it. He's got to go into the fire, and he's got to go forward, and he's got to put and use all that size and ability on Alexander Usyk in December.
Paulie, as far as the Fury-Usyk rematch, where are you on the outcome of that one?
Well, I want to piggyback along what you guys were just talking about. I think, if I hadn't seen the rematch of the Wilder fight where he had that approach, because I was the same way. I thought he was just talking a lot, but there's no way he can go and pressure Wilder, and the way he did it. And I look at Usyk, and he's a much smaller guy. I think, you know what, this might be the approach to take. Also, I don't think mentally you're going to really discombobulate Usyk the way you're able to discombobulate Wilder, where he gets mad and he gets emotional. So I think if you talk like this, I really believe Fury. As far as the rematch is concerned, I think Fury can still win the rematch. It's not an easy fight, because Usyk is not the kind of guy you can just pressure and put on the back foot the same way Wilder is. Because Usyk can box very well. He's got good balance with his feet. Wilder's balance was terrible. Fundamentally, Wilder's feet were horrible. So once you start pushing a guy like that back, you take a lot away from him. Not to say that this isn't the approach to take, though, for Fury. You're a bigger guy. You're a heavyweight. You were calling Usyk a middleweight. Then use that heavyweight physique and make it uncomfortable. But I do think it's still not going to be easy. I could see Fury winning a rematch, but I don't think it's as one-sided as the Wilder rematch.
But why would it now be the approach? I mean, ultimately, everyone looked at the Usyk fight and felt that the size and strength of Tyson Fury was the main advantage. So, without wanting to be a mind reader, which none of us can be, why would that have not been approached for the first fight, and subsequently he's had an epiphany to have it for the second fight? I mean, isn't he just readdressing the window because he's been dealt with by Usyk and he's trying to portray it as an event that he enjoyed and that ultimately was in control of the fight. And I don't think any of us really think, besides a decent passage of time during the fight, that he looked in good nick, but he nearly got knocked out. And I'm trying to take away from this particular observations by Tyson, why would he be approaching it this way now when he approached it completely different? I know because he's lost, and that would be the obvious conclusion. But why wouldn't he have been approaching it that way, given that he said he was the bigger, stronger, ultimately fighting a middleweight? It feels to me like he's redressing the window to make the best version of events to give us an outcome that should have been the outcome in the first fight with that same set of parameters around it.
I understand what you're saying, but again, if I keep referring back to that Deontay Wilder fight, it was Tyson Fury that made those decisions to fight the way that he did. If you remember the first fight, it was Ben Davison randomly that we were talking about that was in his corner. He changed the corner in order to bring in a team that could help him do what he believed was the right way of going about being Deontay Wilder, and he's done that.
But I believed him, by the way. When he said he was going to meet Deontay Wilder in the middle of the ring, I believed him because I think he'd seen Deontay Wilder's power and he thought we could cope with it.
Right, there you go. So he's got data now. He's been in there, he's felt it, he's understood it. I think a lot of people, when they look from the outside of Alexander Usyk, the way that he goes about fighting, I don't think they fully understand. I'm not saying that Tyson Fury didn't fully understand. Of course he did. He's a very intelligent man. But I don't think they fully understand what this guy does. His range control, as Paulie was saying a minute or two ago, about his balance and his feet, is absolutely sensational. He makes you work when you don't necessarily want to work. You're in fifth gear when he's in second and he's waiting for you to do your thing. Said, Absolutely. Yeah. I think now Tyson Fury has got, he's been presented the data in front of him and he's like going, this is actually how you go about doing it. Because if you look at the story of that fight, Usyk comes out and you've got a really competitive first first couple of rounds, as Tyson Fury then makes the adjustment and he starts to go away. Mm-hmm. And then it's Usyk that makes the adjustment, of which then Tyson Fury can't then get back in. I think now that he's got the data, he's going to go, I'm not even going to let him dictate this dance. Yeah. I'm going to do this in order to take over the fight and hopefully, in Tyson Fury's eyes, get him out of there. Mm.
Well, I mean, my view is I think the Fury will win the fight. And I hope he does.
In the way that he's speaking about?
Yeah, because I think that was the main advantage that he had. And I don't know why he didn't deploy it the first time around. It may be because he wasn't able to, or he'd already committed himself to a course of action that he subsequently couldn't reverse out of. But let's move on from Fury and let's move on to the weekend coming up, because we've got a huge fight card. We've got a huge fight. Not just for the purists, but for most people that like boxing, will look at Beterbiev versus Bivol as an absolute outstanding event. But you've also got, the opportunity for Ben Shalom. They wanted to get on the card. They wanted to get at the table. Whether they've been excluded or whether they haven't had the fight stable to quite justify the opportunities that Eddie Hearn and Frank Warren have created for themselves. This is also a big event. Besides the feature card, which we'll talk about in a minute, this is also a big event for Ben Shalom, with the amount of fighters he's got on the card.
Yeah, well, first and foremost, he's got the second best fight on the card, interested in that, with Fabio, Wardley and Frazer Clarke going at it.
You've got Ben Whittaker.
Ben Whittaker's on there, and this is a big night for him, and it's also a big night for Chris Eubank Jr., because with all due respect to both of those guys, they're supposed to win the fights that they're in. Yep. Let's be dead honest about that. If we look at Szeremeta, all right, he's been to the top table and he's fallen short at that top table, but Chris Eubank Jr., if he's going to have these aspirations of doing something major in the sport, he hasn't just got to beat Szeremeta. He's kind of got to make a bit of a statement. He's got to capture the imagination of the fight fan and obviously Turkey Al-Sheikh, who's putting all these cards together, and give them that viral moment. And that kind of applies as well to Ben Whittaker. Listen, Liam Cameron's got an opportunity here. He's had a tough time. Maybe he had a little bit of a harsh treatment, and now he's back. He's going to treat this like the World Cup final. And he's going to come at Ben Whittaker and he's going to try and take the crown of Ben Whittaker. And what Ben Whittaker's got to do, he has got to now provide a moment that really captures the imagination of the fight fan, because we've seen him recently, he's looked really good, but there hasn't been that second, third, fourth gear in that fight of recent times, delivering that viral moment.
Knocking people out.
Yeah. Listen, that's the game that we're in. We have to create those moments because that's how superstars are created.
But you say that. But I mean, Bivol hasn't got a great knockout record, and yet he's a star.
Is he a superstar though? Is he a superstar? Does he cross over into the mainstream?
No. But we're talking about drawing the attention of Turkey Al-Sheikh. I mean, in the light heavyweight division, Adonis Stevenson was knocking people out for far nicer specs. But when we look in that division, it's not renowned, besides Beterbiev, for having people that diminish people in every single fight, is it? Going back to John Conte.
Okay.
what I'm trying to get to is the point is Whittaker is charisma in abundance. He's stardust. He's show business.
You've got to deliver in the ring, haven't you?
And the Saudis are about entertainment and they're about packaging it around. So I think as long as Whittaker wins and wins in a decent fashion, I don't think he needs to put on a statement victory by knocking someone out in 3 or 4 rounds and doing it with aplomb. I think he needs to look like Ben Whittaker and fight the fight that he wants to fight, which will always be laced with charisma and dynamism.
Oh, he's giving you all that. All week he's going to do the brilliant press conferences.
Yeah.
He's going to give you the ring walk. He's going to look $1 million and everybody's going to go, right, I'm in on this kid. But if we get to round 4 and round number 5, and then that looks exactly like round number 2 and round number 3, and it keeps going and it keeps going, people will lose interest. You have to deliver the viral moment in order, especially at this level. Don't get me wrong, he's not fighting a world title fight, is he, on Saturday night?
Where are you, Paulie? I mean, you're quite a flamboyant character. Where are you on Ben Whittaker?
I love Ben Whittaker. I mean, you're asking me. I didn't get a lot of knockouts, but I had a lot of flash, you know. So I don't know if I'm the right guy to ask, because I'm gonna lean towards that flash, that charisma and that flash. But I also think he's got a ton of ability, a tremendous amount of ability. And listen, I understand knockouts will always sell a little bit more. They'll always grasp the casual public more so than the mainstream public more so than just your hardcore boxing fans. But I think Whittaker, being he's got the fan base over there in England. In England, I always talk about it, not just because I'm on talkSPORT. I always talk about the UK fans are a different level. He's a guy from there. When you were talking about Bivol, he's not a superstar, but he's also not from England. While, you know, Whittaker is from England. He's a medalist in the Olympics for England. He's had sort of the push behind him from his pro debut. I think Boxer have done a good job of promoting him from when he started. Yeah, you always want to see more knockouts. Of course, that's going to be part of it. But I don't think it's the be-all, end-all if he doesn't get them. You know, Roy Jones, when he was at light heavyweight, won a lot of fights on points. He was dominant. He won a lot of fights on points. Did it hurt his marketability? Possibly. I mean, I think at that time, Oscar De La Hoya was a bigger superstar in the U.S. than was Roy Jones. But everyone knew Roy Jones was a bona fide best fighter on the planet at that point, you know? So, and he did get some knockouts, but I feel like you take away from a fighter if you try to force him to get knockouts when it's not in his temperament. I think stoppages will come, but I think if you start to try to force Whittaker to try to go for more knockouts when he's got a certain kind of boxing style, you may put him in danger of getting hit with shots he shouldn't get hit with and even getting knocked out. Right now, I think let's enjoy the charisma, let's enjoy the boxing ability. As he raises his level of opposition, we'll see if he's the real deal. Right now, I think he's been the real deal, knockouts or not. But his level of opposition, if you keep dominating, I remember not getting a lot of stoppages, but I remember saying, if I keep dominating my level of opposition, they have to keep raising the bar from my level of opposition because I'm going to show that I'm too good. And when you dominate, it only happens when you dominate. And I think Whittaker's been pretty dominant.
I mean, when you look at the direction of travel for him, Paulie, do you see someone that's got the potential to be a world champion? Because right now there's a lot of noise about him and stylistically he's very easy on the eye. And charisma-wise, which I think says lacking a lot of time in sport, he's there. But do you, without having a crystal ball, do you think he's got the chops to go the full 9 yards, given that some of the timing might help him because Bivol and Beterbiev are coming to the end of their time at the top, perhaps in the next 2 or 3 years by the time he lands there? Do you expect to see Ben Whittaker being a world champion?
I do. And yeah, Beterbiev and Bivol being gone also does help. I think Beterbiev and Bivol being around actually hurt a guy like, for example, Josh Buatsi, who I rate very highly, but he was just in a generation where these guys were around and they were so dominant. Although Buatsi is still around. But I do think that Whittaker has the chops to become a world champion. And just because Beterbiev and Bivol leave doesn't mean it's going to be easy, because you've got at super middleweight some very good fighters who may move up in weight, but they're the young and big guys. At light heavyweight, you're still going to have your run-of-the-mill opposition as well. But I do see Whittaker with the potential to be a world champion. He's come out with a lot of fire out of the amateurs, you know, a lot of push out of the amateurs, and he's been very impressive to that degree. It would still be a big disappointment if he wasn't able to win a world championship. I think the where you go with Whittaker is not if he's going to become a world champion, but what kind of world champion is he going to be? Because you come to a point where there's so much expectation on a fighter because he's expected to be so great that just becoming a world champion can be a sort of an underperformance, you know, and be unappreciated. And I'll give you the example. Mark Breland was a super amateur out of New York, and in 84 he won the Olympics.
I watched him beat
Breland won a couple of world champions. Yeah, Breland won a couple world championships. Still, by and large, his professional career was still looked at as underperforming and even disappointing. Myself, I pretty much accomplished the same thing as Breland, but everybody looks at me like, oh wow, he over accomplished based on what he had brought to the table. So it's all depending on how people perceive
Perception,
you.
yeah.
And I think people perceive Whittaker as somebody who can be great. So just becoming a world champion, I don't think is enough. I think he's got to become a world champion. I think he will become a world champion. But I think then the question is, what kind of world champion is he going to be? Is he going to be that superstar level? And that's what we're still waiting to see. The charisma is there, the skill is there, but is the whole package there to be put together at world-class level? That will remain to be seen.
It's interesting. I was just saying it a moment ago. I went to see Mark Breland fight Lloyd Honeyghan just after Lloyd Honeyghan had lost to Marlon Starling, was making his comeback against Mark Breland, and I thought Mark Breland was a tremendous fighter. But also going on to Whittaker and where he is now, in order to shine with Turkey Al-Sheikh, he's going to want to see him in with bigger names. Is he ready post this fight if it's an impressive performance? And I think most of us expect him to win this fight, but notwithstanding it, that's not taking Lee and Cameron for granted. Is he ready to go in with bigger names, Paulie, do you think?
You know, it'll depend on the performance. You take every performance, you see how he looks, and then you say, okay, again, remember what I said. You've got to continue to dominate. As they step you up, you've got to continue to dominate. You can say you want to fight anybody you want, and you can talk the way you want to, but unless you are completely dominant until you reach world-class level, all the way up the ladder, people won't really think you're of that level. So I think in this fight here, we're going to see not just if Whittaker wins, but is he dominant? Is he going to show that, oh, this guy's just so many classes above this level of opposition that we've got to continue to raise the stakes, you know? And I think if he's able to do that, then we'll get a better gauge in this fight, after this fight, of how much we got to continue to step him up and how fast we got to continue to step him up. You know, I brought up a guy's name like Josh Buatsi. That's not an easy fight. I don't think you can put him right from this fight into a Josh Buatsi fight, but I think that's already somebody you start to look at if Whittaker continues to be so dominant.
Do they put him in with Dan Aziz? Is that where you go next?
I would think, yeah, depending upon how he looks in this next performance. The thing that was going to pop out of my trap. I mean, I know Dan Aziz made the observation, don't put this boy in with me yet, he's got a long way to go. But I think if he is strong in this fight and comes out of it well, I think that is the next step for him. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Obviously, you've got Liam Cameron, who's, you know, the likes of the Lyndon Arthurs of this world. Those types of characters, I think, would be the next logical step.
Before Aziz?
For Ben Whittaker. With all due respect to Dan Aziz, I'd probably put him in that mix as well. You know what I mean? We're talking about an Olympic silver medalist.
I know.
Come on, man. Let's see if he is at the level that people believe that he's at. And then if he is at that level, then all of a sudden now we are talking about Joshua Buatsi and we're talking about Anthony Yard and people like that.
Paulie, let's move on to the main event. This fight that's getting everyone excited, Beterbiev and Bivol. How big a deal is this for you?
I think this is a boxing fan's dream fight. You know, this is the fight that we've wanted for a while. You know, there are fights that, you know, they don't tick the box as far as they cross over into the casual fans, right? But we know as boxing fans that these kind of fights are even better than, you know, your mainstream Canelo type of fights, where I feel a lot of them have recently been a waste of time, right? So when you are a boxing fan and you understand styles and you really understand your boxing, this is the kind of fight you want. This is the kind of fight that gets you licking your chops and gets you really, really excited. Two guys that have been utterly dominant. Yes, Beterbiev is 39 and he's been a bit older, and sometimes he looks like he's, you know, the wagon may fall apart as he has to pull out of fights with injuries and whatnot. It's par for the course for a guy who's older, but when he gets in the ring, he's still been completely dominant, completely destructive, scary. And then Bivol, who has been dominant in a different fashion, you know, in a fashion where he's got that in and out style, so fluid, so consistent, still knows how to boss a fight, even if he doesn't have the power of Beterbiev, takes over the fight, takes control of the fight, basically puts you in his pocket, so to speak, the way he did Canelo, where Canelo was just cooperating with him by the end of the fight and not even trying to win the fight. So you've got guys who know how to win the fight physically and mentally. And when I say physically, they win it in a very different way. And that's where the style clash-up comes in. You know, I've gone back and forth in these months trying to figure out who I think would win it. It's that kind of fight.
Well, that was going to lead, obviously that was going to lead me to my next question. Because
have you changed your mind yet?
No, I'm staying with Beterbiev.
Okay.
But I'm also looking at the calibre opposition, because a lot of noise was made. I mean, when we saw Dimitri Bivol fight Craig Richards, there was a perception in our minds that Craig Richards, if he had a little bit more belief in himself, could have done some more damage to Bivol. And obviously a lot of the Bivol currency has become even bigger as a result of the Canelo Everest performances. And Paulie, I was going to ask you, when you look at the sort of opposition that, say, Beterbiev has fought in the last 3 or 4 fights, Callum Smith, Anthony Yard, Joe Smith Jr., and then you look at what Bivol's fought, and you look at Zinad, who was obviously a substitute.
Yeah.
You put in Lyndon Arthur and Gilberto Ramirez. There is a difference, in my view, about the level of the fights that the two fighters are having. I'm in the Beterbiev camp. Where are you in this fight?
I was in the Beterbiev camp. I've started to lean more towards Bivol as the fight gets closer. I don't think you can underrate the Gilberto Ramirez win. You know, Ramirez had been dominant through the weight classes to this point, and Bivol dominated him. You know, I think it sort of gets put under the rug now, and people sort of forget about it. But that's an underrated win. Also, yeah, they have that opponent in common with Joe Smith. Beterbiev dominated, but then got hurt. Bivol, dominated, but then got hurt bad late in the fight. While Beterbiev completely blew him out of the ring. So you can put that together, but boxing math doesn't always work. Just because A beat B doesn't mean B will beat C or C will beat A, and so on and so forth. So boxing math doesn't always work. It's a matter of style. It's also a matter of timing. I do think Beterbiev is getting a little bit older. Also, Beterbiev, as much of a destructive guy as he's been down against, I think it was Callum Johnson who had him down, right? So you know, it's not like he's this indestructible robot either. I think what I love about these two guys is they know how to mentally boss the fight. They know how to control the fight mentally as well, not just physically. They don't just get in there and, okay, I'm gonna fight the fight out of you. They also mentally start to convince you that I'm the boss. I'm going to put you in your place here in the ring. And so even if you're able to last, you're going to go into a survival mode. And with Beterbiev, typically it doesn't get you to anywhere, because once you go into survival mode with Beterbiev, you're done. Because he gets you. He's just so adept at cutting off the ring and bringing the pressure. But even Bivol, even if he doesn't take you out, that in and out that he's got, that gliding in and out, he's constantly getting off first. He's constantly bossing the fight. Eventually, he's putting you in his pocket too. So I think the energy of Bivol for me is going to be the difference here, because I'm not sure that Beterbiev is going to be able to match it consistently once he's not able to touch him and hurt him. Of course, that's always possible. Beterbiev could get to Bivol. Beterbiev could sort of cut down that ring and get to Bivol. But Bivol doesn't move around like other guys, where you end up starting to move around, and Beterbiev sort of scares you and puts you in that position. Bivol moves and is hitting you constantly. Has he been in with
that kind of power, though, Paulie? Has Bivol been in with that kind of power?
Has. Yeah, nobody has. I mean, that's going to be a first time for everybody, right? I mean, nobody has. But he's aggressive with his movement. In terms of, he's offensively aggressive with his movement. If you notice, the guys who move around with Beterbiev, they're just moving around to get away from him at a certain point. Remember that Bosnick was giving Beterbiev problems. Well, Alexander Bosnick was winning that fight when he got stopped. Beterbiev just tends to make the sand run out of the hourglass for you, and that's the problem. Can he do it at this age against the energetic Bivol? I'm not sure he can at this age.
Did you think that? I mean, I was there.
How good's that? Just listen to Paulie speak about the fight.
Yeah, carries it, doesn't he?
Yeah,
we can just sit here and learn, can't we?
You listened about the silhouettes of what Paulie's talking about, and you're thinking, this is a super fight. I really hope it crosses to the mainstream. I really do.
So do I. Do you think that the Yard fight took anything out of Beterbiev? Because in that fight, you know, Anthony came to fight. I think he did some damage to Beterbiev, and then Beterbiev met fire with fire and took it away from him, bit down his gum shield and took it to a different space. Do you think there's anything like that could be represented in the performance we might see from Beterbiev?
Yeah, I think, like what Paul's just alluded to there, age and injuries, they're going to catch up with people at certain points, and the guy's touching 40 years of age. I know he's got a perfect record. The wins are there, he's undefeated, he's knocked them all out, and he's been brilliant. We've been ringside and watched this guy.
Absolutely.
He uses his jab tremendously, his feet are awesome. And people might just think, oh, he's just power. He's not. He can dance as well. The way that he pressures with his feet is sensational. But he is fighting Dimitri Bivol, whose range control in this division, I've never seen anything like it. And he's so efficient with it, with his work. It is absolutely a beautiful, beautiful fight, of which I think Paulie was alluding to it there. We saw it with Usyk and Fury. There's going to be different questions asked to both of these guys throughout the course of, whether it goes 12, I don't know, but they're going to be asked questions throughout the course of this fight. And it's the one that can answer the questions the best that he's going to come out on top. My big question from Bivol is, does he pop hard enough to stop this tank coming forward? Yep. He's got the feet to stay out of the way, and he's got the ability to beat him on points over that distance. Can he keep him off? Because Bivol isn't just power. He's very, very good with the educated pressure. And that, like I say, I keep alluding to the fact that down the back end of the fight, I think that's where it catches up with Bivol.
I mean, this is a proper fight. It's one that should cross over. It really should cross over from just the boxing purists to the so-called casuals. And that kind of leads me into someone that does cross over to the casuals, which is Chris Eubank Jr.
Yep.
and his re-emergence in a fight that a lot of people are critical of because they think that he's taking an easy fight to get himself back into the groove. It's been a year since he beat Liam Smith. Obviously, he lost to Liam Smith before that, came back and demolished Liam. People make, that Liam Smith was injured in that fight, but notwithstanding, I think Chris Eubank was very impressive in that fight. We hear the usual spiel from Chris. A little bit more than the usual spiel because we heard his opinions on promoters and so on and so forth, but the usual spiel that he's going to fight for world championships, in quick order. I mean, this is an important event for Chris because he's set himself up, and he set himself up with the Saudis. He's set himself up as I'm an island on my own, right? And and you're going to be dealing with me in the future. But this is a big fight for him, isn't it?
This is massive because he's talked the talk, and we're still here waiting to watch him walk the walk. And listen, this is the thing that I've been critical of Eubank. He spent a large part of his career mentioning Golovkin after every fight, mentioning Canelo after every fight, and we're led to believe that he was in the conversation to the fight that Berlanga ended up getting with Canelo. Chris Eubank Jr. is in the conversation there, and the finances didn't match his expectation. I'm critical of that because I want to see my fighters daring to be great. I want to see him roll the dice. I want to see him, if you're going to talk the talk, let's get in there, let's have a go, let's go and become the champion, and then you can go and make a ridiculous amount of cash off the back of that. He's decided that that's not the case. Okay, he's going down this other path now of wanting to make these big fights. He's kind of changed his tact a little bit with the interviews that I've seen recently. Szeremeta, for me, listen, he's been there, he's fallen short at the top. For me, it's an uninspiring opponent, of which, very similar to what I've just said about the Ben Whittaker thing, Eubank's got to look good. Yeah. Go out there, look good, capture the imagination, reignite some type of conversation, and set up a super fight that everybody wants to see in 2025.
Wardley, Frazer, Clarke too. I mean,
brilliant.
Fellas,
number one, by the way.
Jump in, Paulie, whenever you want. This is a great fight, isn't it?
Number one was awesome. And I think both guys come out of that fight. We get a draw, but both guys come out of that fight and they exceeded my expectation. Fabio Wardley comes from that white-collar background, and I thought, OK, he's got the power. Does he have the ring smarts? I looked at that fight and I thought, he's a clever kid when he's in there. There's some really good IQ, of which I expected more from Frazer. And then the questions maybe about Frazer was, has he got the heart for it?
Which he showed.
Can he dog it out? And you think to yourself, wow, man, you really rose as well. Originally, I picked Fabio to come through in the first fight. I'm probably going to stay there just because both guys have exceeded my expectation from the first fight. But this is what I love. Rematches should be warranted off the fight that we see. And we saw a brilliant fight.
Where were you on it, Paulie? Where were you on the Wardley Frazer Clarke?
I enjoyed the first fight. My question is this: Frazer Clarke was an Olympic medalist. Am I right?
Yeah. Bronze. Yeah.
So you've got an expectation that's pretty high. Has he reached his ceiling at this level? With Fabio Wardley, because that fight was right there. You typically in the U.S. we typically expect our medalists to not be really tested until they're at that world class top 10 level. In the very least. And I understand the English scene is much more difficult a lot of times, and it's much more pressure because it's much more of a mainstream sport. But my question is going to go in a different direction. As Frazer Clarke sort of reached that ceiling, is he going to be a domestic level heavyweight, or can he get to that next level? Because again, being in with Turki Al-Ashik loves heavyweight. So if you can become a fun heavyweight, if you can become an effective heavyweight, you can make a lot of money there with Turki Al-Ashik. I love this fight. I love this rematch. I want to get the answer. I want to get the answers to the questions you brought up, especially after that first fight. But I'm also in the back of my mind thinking to myself, this Olympic bronze medalist, and in the same Olympics, we've got the same issue with the heavyweight we had, Torres. I believe it was Torres, the one who lost to Joel in the rematch. We got the same issue in the U.S. where he's moving up, but he's not really moving along at that rate we thought as well. What's the ceiling for Frazer Clarke?
You see, that fight, the one with Wardley, reignited my interest in Frazer Clarke because I think as a pro he's been a little bit underwhelming.
Well, we saw him against Marius Wack and Dave Allen, and they were disappointing performance. What we saw was a different Frazer Clarke in this fight, which is why I moved away from Fabio Wardley. I thought if Fabio Wardley has the power, and if he was going to get him out of there, he would have got him out of there. And I think Frazer takes more from that fight than Fabio does. Okay. And that's why I think Frazer comes back and wins the rematch.
Do you think it changes either man's approach to the second fight, that first fight? Because it was a war.
I think they are what they are, and the fight will be what it is. So. And I hope if it's 50% of the first fight, we're still in for a treat.
Yeah.
We had last week in the studio, we had Opetaia, and obviously he's fighting Jack Massey. not Massey, as he said on your show on Saturday night. I mean, what did you make of Jai? Because he was, I thought he was really impressive myself, and he absolutely drills down. There's no doubt in his mind, and there's no doubt in your mind when you're listening to him how his eyes narrow in. But when you walked away from us talking to Jai last week, what was your overwhelming perspective on him?
Super impressed.
Yeah,
Super impressed. I mean, I've been lucky enough to speak to him on a couple of occasions, and he's so consistent with the message that he puts out there. That's a young man that just wants to find out if he's the best fighter on the planet. He doesn't like the politics, doesn't like the nonsense, doesn't like the BS. He just wants to be put in with the best guys, and hopefully that's going to materialise over the next 12 months for him, because we've got some really good guys in his division, British lads, which creates even more interest from us here at talkSPORT. I personally think he's the number one right now. I want to find out if the other guys can challenge him.
I mean, I saw Jack. Sorry, Paulie, you go.
No, Opetaia is like a boogeyman. Typically in the cruiserweight division, there's not a lot of fun fighters, so they all have to fight each other. I feel like Opetaia is becoming that guy nobody wants to see in the cruiserweight division, which, like I said, in the cruiserweight division, they typically have to fight each other. There's not a lot of guys there that make the weight class fun. So when you see the cruiserweight division, it becomes fun when they fight each other. You don't typically see a cruiserweight who's being avoided by other cruiserweights. I don't know that Opetaia is a guy anybody wants to see in that weight class.
Do you look at it as a fight? I mean, a lot of people are looking at this as a kind of mismatch. I mean, we've seen Jai Opetaia going against Jordan Thompson, and we saw him going against Elisoro, right? And both of those were performances that are of the highest level, but the opponents were of a lower level. When he went in against Marius Briedis, despite the first half of the fight, the second half of the fight was more challenging for him than people anticipated. And we're giving him this boogeyman stance in terms of the challenges that people have of fighting him. Is this... I mean, I saw you again, Adam, talking with Joe Gallagher on Saturday night, talking about this fight. And obviously, Jack's gone in with Joseph Parker. He's had losses to Richard Riakporhe early on in his career, but he's beaten Isaac Chamberlain. A lot's been built upon that. Is this a very, very difficult fight for Jack Massey, an almost unovercomable perspective, or does he have a realistic chance in this fight?
Listen, Jai Opetaia is the favourite. There's no doubt about that, and I think he's an overwhelming favourite. Jack Massey went up to heavyweight, he challenged Joseph Parker, and he made a good fist of that, even though he fell short and Joseph Parker figured him out. He's the European champion. He's earned an opportunity to be fighting at the very top table. He's obviously fighting at the very, very top table of this particular division. And I think he's a better opponent than Mr. Thompson and Mr. Zorro that you've just been speaking about 2 moments ago. Is he of the Billam Smiths? I don't think he is. Is he of the Zerdo Ramirez? I don't think he is right now. But the opportunity is presented in front of him, and he will absolutely throw the kitchen sink at this. I think Jai will come through. I think he'll probably end up getting a stoppage, but he'll be asked more questions than he was in the Thompson and Zorro fights. There's no doubt in my mind about that.
Moving off onto the reappearance of someone, which is Anthony Yarde, out on October the 19th. This is an interesting...
You're going to get us in bother now talking about Anthony Yarde, aren't you?
Yeah, it's an interesting one because, there was all this controversy about Queensberry and Anthony Yarde and arguments going on between Yarde and Tundi and Queensberry not wanting to fight for them again, and potentially if Boxer got involved and scheduled a fight, that there was going to be all kinds of ramifications. And I've been privy to some of the temperature of that. Yet here we find Anthony Yarde fighting on October 19th. I mean, the most important thing is I like him as a fighter. So however he's engineered a situation, whatever the ramifications or whatever may come further down the line, if there is to be some blowback from aligning himself with if he has indeed aligned himself with Boxer, it's good to see him back in the ring, isn't it?
Fantastic to see him back in the ring because he has that charisma. All the things that you were talking about before, he does have the viral moments, he does knock people out, and he's a very likeable lad and you want him to do well. I just find this whole situation a real shame because I personally think that Queensberry and Frank have done really well.
So do I.
I think
2 world title shots.
Mate, they built an unbelievable career for a lad that didn't have a massive amateur pedigree. They got him 2 world title shots. He's had a good fist of it.
And they backed him after he lost to Lyndon Arthur.
Come on. Yeah. So I from the outsider looking in, I think they've done a wonderful, wonderful job. I'm not privy to the conversations. I'm sure you are, but I'm not privy to those conversations. I don't really know what's gone on. But sadly, in business, if you've signed a contract, you see the contract out. After that contract, then you can have a new discussion and we can move it in different directions. I just think Anthony Yarde right now, because of this mess, is missing out on some massive, massive opportunities. I mean, when it was 5v5, could it have been him in there fighting the likes of I don't know, whoever they've got in their light heavyweight division, there's a potential fight here with Joshua Buatsi.
Well, that's what it leads to, doesn't it? I mean, that is the fight I would suspect that certain people will want to be made. I'm pretty sure Josh Buatsi wants that fight. I'm pretty sure Boxer want that fight. And if Boxer are engineering opportunities to make fights with Anthony Yarde, then it's a logical conclusion. Whether the legal ramifications of Queensberry's purported position re-emerge again, if there is an indication that Buatsi versus Yarde is going to be made and it becomes a 2-fight deal rather than a 1-fight deal, we will see. But if we can...
You can only have one tune-up. If he's going to work with Boxer, you can only have one tune-up. He has to fight Buatsi next.
But if it leads into Buatsi, it might find itself in a contractual situation where Queensberry re-emerge and we're not seeing the smiling Queensberry that we're seeing now about allowing this to happen. We might see the snarling Queensberry that were purporting to sue everybody and everyone if Yarde gets into a ring not represented by them, which is in effect what's happening.
Yeah.
But as far as a fight's concerned, that is the fight that we want to see. That's got charisma, energy and crossover all over it, isn't it?
Well, it also distinguishes what comes next, I suppose, for this division. We've got a super fight in our hands this weekend. These two guys are the kings in Bivol and Beterbiev. Crack on the boys, do your thing. But as you've rightfully said, they might call time. You never know. They might call time in 6 months, 12 months' time. So therefore, those belts will be scattered and be thrown all over the place.
Because Buatsi's a mandatory for the WBO and he can call it now, can't he?
Right. So then, will this be a world title fight in 6 months' time because of a situation with the belts and what have you? So it is the, I don't want to say the best of the rest because the two guys at the top are the elite, but it's the next generation coming through and will distinguish who the number one is.
Paulie, where are you on Anthony Yarde?
I like Anthony Yarde. I think he's a fun fighter. I think he's good for the weight class. Just below maybe a world championship level where the weight class is right now, but he's got potential under the right circumstances to possibly win a world championship. I do think it's a shame when you have these outside the ring, court issues and whatnot. But I'll say from the other point of view, I'll say from the fighter's point of view, regardless of what Queensberry may or may not have done for him, if his contract is done, his contract is done. Obviously, Boxer are feeling that his contract is done and they can take him to that fight, and Queensberry may feel like they may have some options or whatever on the contract, and he's got to fight for them. Again, I'm not privy to the conversations.
Matching rights is the argument, Paulie.
What is it?
Matching rights is the argument.
Matching rights.
Yeah.
Okay, so matching rights for if they can match the purse for the fight, essentially.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, regardless, that's something they'll have to have their day in court. Regardless, one or the other, it's a time where you hope you can see Anthony Yarde because he's not the youngest guy, right? I mean, he's not just gotten over here on the scene. We know who he is. He's got a reputation to be a fun fighter in a weight class that could
33,
use some.
Paulie, 33.
Yeah, exactly, 33. So you want to see as much of him as you can. These kind of layoffs that are caused by these kind of court battles or outside the ring politics, they take away from, not just the fighter's ability to make money, but also from the fans' ability to be able to be entertained and see these guys. And it hurts their branding because a promoter lasts 30, 40, 50 years. A fighter only has that window. So he's got to get busy as much as he can. So hopefully we get to see Yarde soon.
Talking about who we have seen or will be seeing, or have seen actually more to the point, was Nick Ball. I think Nick Ball is an outstanding fighter. I think he won against Ray Vargas. He certainly won against Ray Ford. And ultimately he won on Saturday night. Both of your opinions on Nick Ball, the performance on Saturday night against Ronnie Reyes, and ultimately what comes from him next.
This is what I mean about being made for telly, about capturing the imagination of the casual fight fan. If your friend is a football fan and they're not into boxing, and you take them to go and watch a Nick Ball fight, you're constantly on the edge of your seat because the kid is trying to take someone's head off non-stop throughout the whole course of the fight. Might be to his own detriment because he does get clipped a little bit himself, but he's proving that he's got a wicked chin. He is absolutely fantastic to watch, and he's on the cusp now of maybe securing himself some absolute monster fights. And I use the word monster because there's a guy with a nickname that might move up to this division at some point in the not too distant future that might stumble across a world title shot, and Nick Ball might be the guy that holds those belts. I mean, that would be absolutely sensational if it is Noya Inoue that steps up in weight. Nick Ball, sit there. Come on, son, let's have a rock and roll.
Paulie, I mean, Nick has been in some long fights and difficult fights recently. Is there a danger for him that that's going to catch up with him a little bit?
I think it will. I think if you fight like that, you probably shorten your prime or you shorten your career. But that's all. The only way he knows how to fight is one way. You know, he goes. It's a go get you kind of style. Listen, this guy's really short. When I first saw him, it reminded me sort of like Gavin Rees. Remember Gavin Rees back in the day? He was really short and he was able to win a world championship. I'm like, right, England produces these kind of short, stocky guys that win world championships, you know? But Ball is super entertaining. I really enjoyed his fight the other night against Rios, and I've enjoyed him thoroughly. He's not the guy who wows you with a crazy amount of skills, but his stick-to-itiveness, his go-get-you mentality. I mean, you look at the first round in that fight the other night, and he's throwing overhand rights and left hooks within 10 seconds. I mean, he's not, you know, usually you're feeling it out, you're putting out jabs, you're putting out feints. This guy's throwing power shots within 10 seconds of the fight. He's looking to throw combinations, you know? So he goes, gets it, he's entertaining. And it's like you said, Adam, it's about, you know, you want to take a friend of yours who might be a casual and you want to get him into boxing. You look for a fighter like this to take him to that fight, because also Ball doesn't have that crazy monster power where he's going to end the fight in one night and you're going to say in one round and you're going to say, I didn't see anything. No, the fights last with Nick Ball, they're entertaining throughout. So you get your money's worth as well.
I mean, yeah, he is small. He's one of those that can limbo under a table on Cuban Hills in a top hat. But is he? Do you see him getting a rematch with Ray Vargas? Because I think some of the stuff that came out of Ray Vargas' mouth after that fight about fighting Nick Ball in his hometown was just utter nonsense. And he lost that fight. And he wants it, and Nick wants a WBC strap.
Yeah, I think that's the logical next thing, because there is doubt over that particular fight. I thought Ray actually started really well in the fight, then Nick came on,
caught up with him.
yeah, and put him down on a couple of occasions. I think for the division, that's the logical next fight. It's a unification now, so let's bring them together. I mean,
I got another unification though. I like Angelo Leo as well. You know, he's kind of short and stocky too, and you know he has that goal.
You just want to see carnage, Paulie. I can see it. You just want to see some serious carnage there.
You know, listen, I don't mind Ball going after Vargas. I think everybody except for 3 judges thought Ball beat Vargas. You know, I don't understand how that decision wasn't given to him. But in terms of stylistic, I think it's more fun with Ball and Leo, because Leo also goes and gets you the same way. You know, and yeah, I guess we want to see carnage.
But you're right. I mean, look at what he's done recently. He fought Isaac Dogby, which was his coming-of-age night, where you thought, hang on a minute, there's more about you than just being this wrecking machine. And then he's had 2 back-to-back world title fights, obviously coming through and getting the belt off Ray Ford. I think go back for Vargas. But I like what Paulie's just said there. Let's just have some pure carnage.
No, I think it's brilliant, and I think he deserves it.
And that's a unification too.
Yeah, absolutely. That unification next, defo.
But I think, listen, I mean, some criticism was laid at the door that it was a homecoming for him against a slightly softer opponent.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
But I think he earned the right to have a fight where it isn't, albeit it went 10 rounds, albeit he dropped him in the 3rd and 7th and probably made it a little bit more difficult than he needed to. But the point is that he came out and did his job, and he'll go on. Right, listen.
In Rios as well, a former world title challenger. You're not talking about a taxi driver from somewhere.
No, I know, but
absolutely below the level of his last 3 fights. Next one, let's go for a unification, as the boys have been saying.
Right. That's it for episode 90 of Talk Boxing with Simon Jordan and Adam Catterall. I want to thank Paulie Malignaggi for joining us in America, and we'll see you guys next time we're out.